Well, welcome everyone. Nobody said and guessed why, but that was Yeah's maps. Why? Because we're here to talk about GIS today. So for those of you who are new to this initiative, which I don't see anybody, but just in case, the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice, SLECOP, supported by TIES, which you can find at stemecosystems.org, harnesses the power of business and industry, funders and foundations, K-12 schools, higher ed, and more to find solutions to common problems and to build thriving communities. The SLECOP is focused on an inclusive STEM community that champions access to innovation, opportunity, equity, and lifelong learning. And as you know, we experienced some transformational moments during the convening in May in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. If you were there, you saw me scooting around on my jazzy scooter. I can sort of walk now, so that's exciting. And we had more time to think deeply about the challenges our ecosystems face in these extended sessions that we've gotten really great feedback about. Einstein said, "It's not that I'm smart, it's just that I stay with the problems longer." And the Jacksonville convening presented this really unique opportunity for us all to sit with the problems longer. We found along the way that we're not sitting alone, though. Meeting rooms were really filled with leaders in the fields who are interested in and colleagues from other ecosystems to work out solutions and blueprints for progress with us. And in keeping with the theme for that convening, I ideate, innovate, implement. Is that right, Xan? Did I do that right?
That's
I think
exactly
ideate,
right.
innovate, implement. We have leaders from the GIS design studio, Tom Peters, Lauren Ballard, and Nikki Glazer here to continue. Nikki, you're going to have to, I never remember how to pronounce the second half of your last name, so I apologize for that. You're going to have to fix it for me. To continue the work and deep conversation that began during that session in Jacksonville. And we're going to close out with some news and additional resources from my colleague, Julie Stolzer, Senior Consultant with TIES. You'll learn more about the next steps in mapping what's going on across your ecosystem. If you have any questions while our guests are speaking, just go ahead and pop that in the Q&A button down at the bottom. I'm going to change the settings right now to allow people to see all those questions. So as you see questions come in, you can also upvote them. So if you see a question that you would like answered as well, go ahead and upvote it. We'll get to as many of those as we can. So first up, I'm really excited to meet a new friend, and that's Lauren Ballard. Lauren, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it's so nice to meet everyone, and thank you guys for having me. So my name is Lauren Ballard. I'm an education specialist with the South Carolina Coalition for Mathematics and Science, and I graduated from Auburn University with a degree in geospatial and environmental informatics, which is just long for GIS. So thank you guys for having me today.
But I like environmental informatics. That's a very fancy title. We also have with us Tom Peters. Welcome, Tom.
Hello, all. Good to see you. Lauren, I'm going to remind you to put up the slides. Otherwise, I don't know who I am. I am the Executive Director of South Carolina's Coalition for Mathematics and Science, and I see that quite a number of our colleagues from SCCMS and STEM centers are with us today. So, hi, y'all.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. We also have my friend Nikki Glazer, and such a good friend that I always mess up her last name. Nikki, I'm going to repeat it after you.
Hi, I am Nikki Glazer Stoikoi. It makes more phonetic sense.
Stoikoi. Got it.
If you ignore the U at the end, I think it makes sense. But it is what it is. My name is Nikki Glazer Stoikoi. I'm the Director of Data and Analytics for a company called New Growth Group. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio. We specialize in workforce, and I also have my master's degree from Cleveland State University with a specialization in GIS, which is why I try to do map stuff with all the work that I do. And so I think that's how I'm looped into this.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. Nikki's one of my go-to people when I have any kind of data questions. And finally, we have the founding director of the SLECOP, one of my favorite people to work with, Julie Stolzer. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me. That title is actually old. I was going to try to fix that slide. Sorry about that. I'm really director now of strategic collaborations, and I'm working extensively with the federal agencies that are utilizing a STEM ecosystem-like approach. And one of those elements that's been developed out of the Department of Defense is the GIS map. So there's lots of overlap and opportunity for conversation. And the GIS mapping team was generous enough to give me a little time at the very end to share some of those resources with you guys.
And that's, I'm sure Julie will mention this, but that's if you were at the convening, if you saw those big balloon globes with QR codes on them that led you to a list of resources, that's part of that initiative. It was super cool to play with. So I want to dig right into this. So Tom, could you start off with a little bit of a summary of the key ideas of your design session, which I think was called Connecting the Dots, GIS asset mapping as a power tool for STEM ecosystems.
Yeah, that was our title. I'm going to go backwards before I go forward. So we have, over the last few years, tried our hand at asset mapping, and we tried the traditional route of putting on maps everyone and every event that had anything to do with STEM, and it's exhausting. And you can't keep up with it, and it's never current, and it's always too late. So we had kind of a change of thought midstream, in part because we were we happened to wander into the existence of Laura Ballard and brought her on our team, and we were able to do some thinking about asset maps in some different ways. So we have three kind of approaches we take to mapping. One is to try to bring to light the concept of STEM ecosystems. If you ask the average person on the street what a STEM ecosystem is, they will look at you with a blank face. If you ask the average person who funds our work or supports our work what a STEM ecosystem is, they'll give you that same blank face. So we have to do some concept development, and maps help us with that. We only have so many resources, and we have to find great places to put those resources. So mapping helps to guide our use of the resources we have. And then, of course, our resources come from a variety of places, and those folks who support us want to know what we've done. So mapping helps us to show the impact of our work and the work of our many partners. We're not trying to map the STEM universe. That, like I said, we tried that, and we just can't do it. So Lauren, I think on the next slide is, yeah, so if you want to see our attempt to map just a teeny portion of the STEM universe, we now do it this way through a wakelet called STEM Links. So we do try to keep track of some of the events and activities going on in our ecosystem, but that's a minor portion of the work we do.
And so part of what we talked about is at our design session is just what is some data that's readily accessible. And with this, we have the United States Geological Survey Earth Explorer, which is an online app, which is actually where you can pull and retrieve aerial or satellite images to overlay with your data. There is also the US Census Bureau, which is the different census blocks across the United States that you can overlay with your data. There's also the National Park Service. So if you would like to look into the different outdoor classrooms and to kind of plug in that to your ecosystem. And what I primarily use, the city, county, state, and federal GIS resources, is mainly for just boundaries. So if I would like counties across the entire state, if I just want one county, then that is just where I can go in and retrieve that data. Within this red box, there's the internal database, as I would kind of phrase it. So, for example, we have our own staff members at SCCMS that contributes to our data set. We also have our business partners, teachers and affiliating schools, and there's also nonprofit and partnering organizations to add to our data set. So within our record of work, I'm just going to lightly touch on this. So basically, we have Microsoft Power Apps, which is where every single person in our organization is able to upload their data, and we have our record of work and event work Microsoft Power App that is all within the Microsoft Access database. So as we transfer that into GIS, I would really like to ask the question, what data do you think is critical for a STEM ecosystem to record? And feel free to go ahead and answer that in the chat.
So, Lauren, while people are answering in the chat, what types of things do you sort of try to look for, or are there guidelines for people as they're thinking about data for what they need to have in order to make it compatible with a system like GIS?
Yeah, so primarily, basically, I like to look at everything in Excel because you can upload that directly into GIS. So you can basically input all of that data into Excel and upload it as a table, and you can also geocode that data to add a spatial reference.
And I'm seeing as people are answering, numbers of students served and educators served. That's a huge one. Julie mentioned program impact. Partnerships between organizations. Man, that's not even one that I would have thought about, but holy cow, would that be useful? Some of you know that I have the opportunity to work a little bit with the ecosystem in my hometown, and boy, would that be really useful for us to be able to kind of visualize, where's the sort of flow of support and the flow of information around the region. As you survey data contextualized to time and space. Wow, that would be really, really powerful. The caliper data, Xan mentions, many of you have completed or are planning on completing that caliper data.
Yes, and Jeremy, I'll go ahead and I'll let you take it from here.
All right, so I know that if you could go ahead and drop that slide down, Lauren, if we're done with slides so people can see your faces, I'd appreciate it. So Lauren and Nikki, maybe Nikki, if you wouldn't mind starting, as you kind of think back about the session that you had back in Jacksonville, what were some of the really critical takeaways that you learned or that you think that audience learned while they were with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of my key takeaways were really nicely highlighted on that opening slide that Tom showed. And, thinking about collective impact and as well as the limited resources that each STEM ecosystem has, it'd be nice to have unlimited time and resources, but we don't all live in that, magic place. But so it's important to assess what the individual STEM ecosystems regional assets are. And so, which partners might you work with within your ecosystem that might have data that would benefit from being, visualized on a spatial lens like ArcGIS. It could be overwhelming to think about, mapping stuff, but you might not need to start from scratch with data collection. And so, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, really, it's a collaboration with the other partners in your ecosystem to put this together. I guess that's my thoughts.
So Lauren, I know that there's some discussion about kind of public data and data that's accessible that maybe ecosystems aren't really using or accessing. Can you talk about a little bit about that, the need for those ecosystems to collect that and I guess kind of what are people missing out on if they're not using this data in a system like GIS?
Yeah, I think, with the definition of a STEM ecosystem, it's not only your own organization's data, it's really everything that's moving around you. So whenever you overlap the data from national parks, for example, if you want to overlap the data with museums, just everything that is government related, that just adds so much value to your data set. And so if you would like students or if you would like as an organization to really understand as a whole what is going on around you, along with business partner data, that type of thing, you can start to understand the importance of spatial thinking applied to your STEM ecosystem.
And I know I've got a lot of questions because I kind of love this stuff, so I've got a lot of questions. But don't forget, if you do, to get those in the Q&A tool, we'd love to go to you. So think about, as we're talking, think about the ways that you're sort of struggling with this data, or what questions you have in order to make this possible in your ecosystem and your region. What do you need to know to really access this type of knowledge? And get those questions in the chat. We'd love for you to leave here ready to go and ready to really jump into continuing this work. So, Lauren, I know that you've mentioned before the SCCMS. I have that written down. You're going to have to remind me what that acronym stands for, Record of Work. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what kind of data you collect, and how these data are really put to use?
Yeah, so as I kind of touched on earlier, within SCCMS, every single staff member basically records their work that they complete, whether it's professional development, whether it's event work, which has to do with festivals or attending conferences and presenting at those conferences. And so it's always tracked within this Microsoft Access database in the form of a Power App. And so I'm just going to share my screen really quick. And so basically, this is the back end of what our database looks like. And I don't want everyone to get overwhelmed, but basically, if you were just to Google Microsoft Access database walkthrough, there's so many free tutorials on basically how to go about creating your own database. But on the front end, this is what our staff members see. So we have our service work entries where there's obviously a lot of detailed different fields. So we have the start date, end date. We have the different SCCMS organizations in the STEM region, the different service and program types, and also within our event work, it's pretty similar. So, so whenever we backtrack to our database, the more data we have, the better, and we can answer more complex issues or more complex problems of, you know, where have we touched in the past 3 years, where whenever you upload that into GIS, we can actually spatially see where have we been, where have we not been. And there's also a lot of tools within GIS that we can combined with our data set to answer more complex questions of, you know, of filtering out data by academic year, of seeing, you know, a spatial buffer of if we have a point, how many opportunities have we reached within 10 miles, for example, of a city center, that type of thing. So.
And that sounds really, really impressive. And like you have a lot of access to knowledge, but I'm sure it's a lot harder with more complications than you seem, at least when you started it up. So, you know, what are the the roadblocks? What are the limitations? What do people need to be thinking about as they try to develop a system like this?
Yeah, so some of the roadblocks is definitely where I would probably say, how is your organization currently recording their own data? So is it within, okay, let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we see it. It's there's a lot of text on there. It's hard to read it, but it is up.
Yeah.
We understand it perfectly.
That's the scary picture we show you.
Yeah, so within your organization, so there's basically, is it on paper, for example? Can you upload that into Excel, for example? I would probably start to look at how are people keeping track of their data? Is it written? Is it over emails, that type of thing? And as you begin to move forward, and like I was saying earlier, you know, Microsoft Access is an amazing tool to keep track of data, and you can actually export it in the form of an Excel file into GIS. And so, for example, this is what our database looks like, but on the front end, this is how easy it looks for our staff members to upload their work that they've been doing. But on the back end, this is what I can see, and I can actually create a query, pick and choose what I want, upload that into GIS. And this is just a service work example, and then this is the event work example. But as far as roadblocks, I would probably say with public data, there's not as many roadblocks. It's very easy to upload that into GIS, but within your own organization, just just ask the why of, or how is data being stored and analyzed currently, and how can we implement that into Excel, or how can we start recording it with as many details as possible, that type of thing. And so Access is a great way to do that.
So, what sort of recommendations do you make to ecosystems who are trying to get started? So, this is a complex thing. So, I guess I have kind of a two-pronged question. The first is, can somebody who's not a GIS expert get started? And if so, what can they do? And where do we sort of draw the line that if you want to really dig into this, you're going to have to find somebody who's either local or remote who can really help with that complexity? Tom?
Yes. So as I mentioned, Lauren is only recently with us. I think she's about 1 year now. Are you? Yeah. We have 9 years worth of data. And that's because we decided a long time ago that data needed to be collected. So step one is a data collecting mindset. If you're not already collecting data, you're never going to map. So part of that, and I know some of my colleagues are online here, part of that was helping convince the members of our organization that data were important and data needed to be collected, and data collection was part of their job. Then the next piece is, okay, if we're going to collect data, how do we collect data in ways that are easy? I can assure you that 9 years ago, our data collection consisted of putting things on pieces of paper and creating giant stacks of paper. I do not recommend that as a starting point. We have this wonderful app that you've seen the face of, but we didn't start that way. And you don't have to start that way. But if you have the resources and you can start that way, the more you can automate, the easier the process is, the easier it is to build that mindset of, oh, this is part of my job and I'll do it. The other piece too is when we develop a partnership with another organization, part of the memorandum of understanding is that that organization will submit data into our database. So that way we're tracking not just what we do directly, but what our partner organizations do as well.
I think that makes sense. And you know, Lauren, I'm sure you saw some of this, but I won't put you on the spot with your still only 1-year-old boss. So Nikki, I'm curious, you know, when people like you or Lauren are pulled into a project, I'm sure this happens a lot where people decide they want to do a GIS system, and they've been collecting data, but without the support of a GIS person for a number of years. I imagine that happens. So when you get pulled into a project and you look at the data they have, what are the things that make you say, oh no, oh God, no, why did you save it? Why did you do it like this? What should we be thinking about in those years ahead of pulling in the GIS person to make sure that we've got in our database?
You want me to start answering? Okay.
I do, Nikki. Yeah, thank you.
I'd say one of the big things I think about is like consistency in how you are collecting your information. And so coming up with like, I don't know, rubric might be the right word, or like a specific naming convention for things, for example. And so because it's silly things like changing what you call something, like you might know what the long acronym, Tom, for your organization is, but like maybe someone else types it out, the full acronym, or maybe there's a typo in there or something. And then all of a sudden from year to year, it becomes hard to connect things. And so, you know, Excel is super amazing and super smart, but it doesn't always know when we make typos. And so figuring out a consistent way to track things and call things, I think would be one.
So making sure that the things are kind of called the same things. I assume, and Nikki, Lauren, tell me if I'm nuts here, but I used to do, it's been like 25 years, but I lived in this world a long time ago. And I can think of things like, there were times where not that this is the end of the world, for one database, the first column was the name of the asset, but in the other database, it was the third column. So like I had to deal with that stuff, and it's dealable, but I imagine that if I was walking in, I would have loved it if not only were those naming conventions the same, but sort of the structure of the different databases were somewhat similar. Anything else, Nikki or Lauren, that people should really be thinking about as they collect this data?
I was going to add in, so earlier, whenever you said the one